on Mashujaa Day. Let's start maybe with the coverage. It's always, we almost have a template that we use for most of our official celebrations. Is there something we can do different about our coverage on this kind of occasion?
Well, I mean, there's a lot that we can do different. I mean, and you're right that it is very, it's got a template, very predictable. You'll get some a few sort of rehashed stories from way back, what happened and stuff. But I find that it's not, it's just a repetition. So like the Nation are playing the Muigai documentary, which I think they had played last year, as well. I think it was launched last year in 2013. So there's quite a lot more I think that could be done. If you looked at the TGRC report, for example, there's very many stories that lie over there untold. We've got 40,000 witness interviews that the TGRC did. That could be a way of trying to understand our history from the viewpoint not of the people who are in power, but of the common regular Mwananchi who experienced it. So I think there's a lot more could be done if people actually were willing to invest in finding out and telling those sorts of stories instead of simply repeating what we've seen in the past.
Okay. Dr. Buka?
Yes, I agree with Gavara that I think what we see is a template. You can almost predict what kind of stories the media is going to give you. So much so that I think you're better off doing other things than waiting for the speech. And waiting for the speech, which you can also be able to get online, after a while. And I think what is missing in most of the coverage is the going back into history to check on some of the promises that are usually made, or challenging some of the content that is in the speech. When I listened to the president yesterday, I almost asked myself, am I living in the same country? It sounded too good to be true. And yes, I appreciate the fact that there have been certain gains, but there are also other issues that we wanted to hear him speak about. And I think what is going to happen next year is, if we had a situation where media, goes back and says, this is what we were told in 2015. This has been the, the situation 1 year later. I think going back into history to try and interrogate some of the issues that come out, in the speeches, in some of the statements that are made would be important. But then, as Gadare says, that calls for a lot of investment in media houses, in the kind of journalists that we have, who can be able to think outside of that template, that has been there for a while. And then I think also the focus. I looked at one of the papers and they have pictures of the powerful women in Kenya and how they showed up at the celebrations. And I asked myself, what's the importance of this? I think it's trivializing,
that's thinking outside the box.
That's thinking outside the box.
Yeah, and it's also painting a picture of the glamour that was there, and just giving us an idea of how it felt.
I think when you look at women in power, you need to look at more than just the glamour around it, and that then simplifies the work of women in society. I think there is much more to just showcasing how they appeared at the celebrations, and that is something that we always see. There is much more that we can look at and focus on. How come we don't see men and how they showed up
and how they walk?
And how they walk?
Well, women, I guess, are a symbol of glamour and
yes, but there is much more to that, because then that reduces us to just
what we look like.
What we look like, and there is there are brains behind those women. So I think for me that didn't sit very well with me.
Okay. Clay, you're taking parts of coverage. Is there any way we can get out of this template, and especially in regards to coverage on the day? It's almost predictable. We're going to have a reporter there telling us the place is filling up. Yes, the choirs are getting ready. Is there a way we can change that script?
Oh, we forgot to add the following day. There's pomp and splendor. We have to use those.
Those two words have to be there.
Words that we consistently use.
It's boring. It's boring because of also the way the thing is organized. Because by now I would have expected that this National Day, it's the same thing. I mean, the state successive governments have been doing it. It's either Uhuru Park or Nyayo. And I thought that probably they needed a change, maybe like, okay, fine, let's celebrate this thing. It's a Kenyan National Day. Let's try and celebrate it this time in Mandera. Let the president go and celebrate the whole thing in Mandera. Let's try another time. Let's do this in Turkana. You know, I mean, make it a little bit interesting. As for the media, I don't know what to say because. It's the same thing. We do the same thing. I mean, like a few stories change. Like yesterday, I saw this Mashujaa Day since it started. Yesterday, I think we find people. We picked on some sportsmen. We interviewed them. We picked on the guy who designed the AU logo. We interviewed. Yeah. So it's more or less like the same thing. Just what do they say? Different monkeys, same forest, or different forest, same monkeys.
Yeah. Same thing.
But those the Shujaas we're celebrating, isn't that? I mean, how else would we interview, or who else would we interview other than those who actually...
I mean, it's all about style. From the way these guys are speaking, it's all about style. I mean, I'm not castigating the media, I'm not passing judgment per se, but from the way Gadara and Dr. Buka are saying, it's like what we do is it's boring, you know. So yes, we have to do this. I mean, probably the same people we interviewed last year. I suspect there's some people we interviewed last year that we're going to interview now. There's so many of these heroes. I think what we need to do is probably the angling of our stories is what we need to change and stop this thing like, okay, fine, on 20th of October we will go and look for this Shujaa. We should probably find a way of maybe if it's, I mean, having these things maybe periodically or maybe weekly or maybe monthly, you know, throughout the year, not just wait for that time where you know that, okay, fine, tomorrow between from 15th to 20th, the media will be looking for the so-called Shujaas and interviewing them. I think that's probably what we need to change.
Okay.
But there's very little, like, as long as this thing is done the same way that, okay, fine, you go to Uhuru Park, there's a guard of honor, then after that there is a State House party.
There's some entertainment.
There's some entertainment and the State House party and all that, some entertainment with bad whatever sound quality. Then after that you go. So it's the same thing.
Is this the day when they give out the awards?
It's not just the media alone.
But my point, I think
it speaks volumes also about the way we organize our events.
Yeah, well, that's true. But I also think that, I mean, the speeches that are given, especially the presidential speeches, are fairly anticipated and waited for thing. It's a big policy statement, you know, and I find very little in terms of trying to anticipate it, you know, and explaining a context around it.
But you see that one, you cannot blame the media for it.
I think
the only thing probably the media can do is maybe interrogate, like, okay, fine, last year this is what you said, between that time and now what has changed, you know.
There's also setting the stage about the things that he should speak about, you know, what are the things that we should expect. And secondly, I think a lot more probably could be done, of course in conjunction, I suppose, with State House and stuff, try and get that speech before, you know, and get hints. What is it going to cover? And then we can start interrogating it from before. I mean, they do this in other countries, you know. I think, I mean, if you look at the run-up to it, I mean, he had an interview on CNN where he said some fairly atrocious things, you know, both about homosexuals, you know, and another thing that really stood out to me was he gave out a figure saying that 98% of all IDPs had been resettled in their original homes, which is the first time I'm hearing this figure, you know, and you're wondering, where is it from? Where does it come from? Who are we resettling if 98% are already back in their homes? You know, and again, we need to interrogate some of these things in the run-up to it, so that you lay a context for that speech. You know, so when he gives it out, there's an expectation, and he knows he's got to live up.
You can almost measure and say, did he miss it or did he?
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that, I think anticipating what you know, what the speech is likely to point towards helps in identifying the kind of experts that then media houses will have in the studio on that particular day to analyze the speech. I think oftentimes what we see, you know, are what, you know, Clay doesn't like, the political analysts who come out.
We didn't have any yesterday, no?
No, we didn't see that. Who come up and analyze it.
We're facing them out.
Yeah, from that
box.
So I think, you know, getting experts in the various areas, you know, when he talks about security, you know, can we have, you know, security experts? When he talks about education, can we have experts in education, you know, interrogating what he has said? And that can only happen when you have anticipated what is likely to be on the speech. Which media houses should be able to?
No, I think that would be speculation, because you cannot, with the Kenyan political system, you cannot anticipate, or you cannot, I mean, it's the only people who speculate and start talking about things that have not happened are political analysts. But I mean, as professionals, it's very, very difficult, because we are dealing with a very unpredictable political class. You see, who actually, they shoot from the lips, not from the hip. You know, they can say anything at any time. So you can. It's very difficult to plan. It's very difficult to plan your coverage. It's very difficult to plan your coverage based on what these people are going to say.
What
I think what is
about.
missing. I think what, for me, because I don't think you know, what he spoke about was, you know, something that, you know, there was no wow factor. Like, you know, I think for me, what shocked me were the statistics. But in terms of the areas that he tackled, you know, I knew he was going to do that. You know, those are things that he was going to speak about. The difference for me was the kind of statistics and the figures that were then attributed to this, which, you know, even if as a media house you're not able to anticipate the figures, you can be able to anticipate some of the areas that he's likely to talk about. You know,
and it's not just what he's likely to talk about. I think it's what he should talk about. You know, in a very real sense, I mean, he's giving a policy statement, you know, and we've got issues that we have, you know, that need addressing. It's not really about...
It's not so much getting it accurate, this is what the
entails, precisely.
But more of these are the issues that should be handled.
In other countries where you've got people who are sort of seconded or their correspondents who cover the presidency, you know, itself, they are able, through their contacts and stuff, to get this. And actually some administrations make it policy to give out copies of these statements, to leak it before it is given, so people can actually start analyzing it before. But my point here is that if we set out a stage and say these are the issues for the country, you know, then on the basis of that we have a way of holding it to account. It's not just about what he says, it's about what he should be talking about.
Okay.